Awesome. We are live. Sweet. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk with me. How's life been? What's new?
Life's good, man. Life's really good. What's new? Right now, I'm working on organizing my project to the Middle East. I'm going back to Oman, which is a little country right next to Saudi Arabia. And there's a big wall there called Jebel Misht. It's about 1,000 meters tall. And I had an accident there back in 2010. I got pretty hurt. And I didn't manage to finish the route I was attempting that time, so I'm going back in February with a bit of luck to go and finish that route.
Sick. And that, I guess, is a nice segue into kind of introducing yourself. Could you just give the listeners your name and what you're into and, what's going on?
Yeah, so my name's Gareth Leah. I'm from North Wales in Great Britain, and I like big walls and boulders.
Nice. And the way we met was through the Locals Project and some stuff we were doing with Backcountry with a feature, which turned out really awesome. And I appreciate all the work that you put into that because it was really awesome. And I think we had some, like, the start of a couple of different little conversations while we were messing around on the streets that got me interested to talk to you more about your background and, like, kind of some of the decisions you've made just because you're into so much badass different stuff. How did you end up deciding, like, as a kid? Because I think we had talked a little bit about how the area that you grew up in was kind of like a dead end for what you wanted to do. How did you end up kind of finding climbing? And then how did you end up making the decision to end up, leaving that area and trying to get into something better?
All right, so where I grew up in England is a very small town. It's called Ellesmere Port. There's not a lot there. It's pretty poor, and there's not really any opportunity to progress anywhere. It's very much a dying town. And so as a kid growing up there, my hope for myself was that I just wouldn't end up in prison. That would be like, a good thing. When I was about 14, I came down with what's called Steven Johnson syndrome. It's an autoimmune disease where your body rejects your skin. So my entire skin on my body fell off, everything from my nose to my ears to my lips to my fingernails. And for most people, it can be fatal. And somehow, through some miracle, I was able to get through that. And I came out the other side with a pretty tenacious attitude to try and do something with myself and not just, to kind of raise my own personal bar from, not making it to prison just didn't seem like really much of a goal in life. So ended up in university, which was, I really don't know how I even made it through that, to be honest. And while I was there, I met some really cool people that talked me into rock climbing. And I wasn't really into it at first, I went along and it was kind of, whatever. But a friend of mine took me multi-pitch climbing, which is where you got multiple, I guess, pitches above the ground. And I just had such a great time, we got really high up, you get to look down, there's all this huge exposure, you feel like the air below you, and I got a real kick out of that. And I've kind of been I guess I'm addicted. I've been addicted ever since. So yeah, I kind of somehow, was lucky enough to fall into a good group of people that were willing to share their knowledge and experience. And I've been using that as kind of my life compass ever since.
That's awesome. So how did you end up kind of getting deeper into the climbing itself? Because I think with at least my experience has been, it's one of those sports where you really need to like latch on to people that know what they're doing and kind of have a mentor or a group of mentors, because it's not a sport that you can just get into by yourself and start going at stuff. You really need to like learn the ropes, pun intended, and like really understand what you're doing and the repercussions of like all the stuff that's going on while you're out on the wall. How did that progression happen from like you being somewhat not into what was going on to being like, okay, this is really something that I'm really into?
All right. So when after that kind of illness at 14 and knowing that, that illness can actually come back, it kind of gave me this really aggressive attitude to succeed in whatever I did. And so when I finally decided climbing was going to be my thing, I kind of went at it like, like a bull or a flag. So I just started reading. Like I spoke to everyone I could about, what they knew, and I would try and absorb anything I could from them. And then I would buy these books and I would just read and read and read, and I'd practice. And a lot of people were like, you need to do this course to do this, and you need to do that course for this. And, I came from a really poor family. I could barely afford college. I was working like multiple jobs to make that possible. And, I just couldn't afford more to go on these courses. So I just go and learn on my own. I borrow equipment from the local university climbing club, and I'd just go out and I'd figure it. Sometimes I'd find myself like rope soloing to try and figure out these tricks, and which isn't particularly safe. I was doing, I later found out I probably wasn't even doing it quite correctly, but I was in such a rush to learn and to kind of know more about this that that was my solution to the problem. That was how I was going to learn. And so yeah, I kind of spent about, from the first time I started, I spent the first 2 years just chasing it on my own for the most part, and on weekends if I could, getting out with the university climbing club. And it was just I felt like I was on a roller coaster, like, and I was barely able to hang on. I was just kind of riding this adventure, and it was just incredible. The more I did it, the more involved I got, the more exciting it got. And it just seemed like the more skills I learned, this bigger world opened up. Like all of a sudden, it went from it was just like, oh, I could climb this grade. I could climb these kind of walls. And then once you learn all these skills, you're like, wow, now I can climb this mountain I didn't think it was even possible. Like all these doorways seem to open up, and I just got submerged in it.
Yeah, I think the beginning grips of that are starting to hit me and a couple of the people that we go out with too, but very, very base level compared to what you're doing. So how did that next 2 years end up progressing then? Like, you said it felt kind of like a roller coaster. Were you kind of like trying to veer the ship and like tip it toward a certain direction that you wanted to go, or like what took you from the learning steps to getting to different grades and starting to climb harder and harder stuff to being like, okay, now I'm really into this expedition type thing and I'm going to where you mentioned Oman and stuff like that?
So during university, I started like managing the university climbing club, and part of that was to do these trips, and I had to organize them for people. So I would choose different destinations, and we'd travel around, and it kind of started small. We'd go climb locally, and then my horizons kind of exploded. Like I was like, it went from wanting to climb locally to wanting to be like in Pakistan. Like I saw these pictures in these magazines and online, and I was just like, wow, like, if I can climb this, maybe I can climb that. And I guess I was, my ambitions were probably bigger than I were. In fact, I'm pretty certain they were, and my ambitions were bigger than my abilities. And after university, I knew that I didn't really want to do where I'd studied, even though that, I'd spent 4 years working towards this computer science degree. And I'd worked really hard for it. And all of a sudden, the only thing in my life was climbing. It's all I wanted to do. And so I ended up in the Middle East, in Oman. And while I was out there, that's where that accident happened. And it was kind of an eye-opener. And I think suffering the injury was kind of both a blessing and a curse. In some ways, like it obviously put me in recovery for almost a year. I was very, very lucky to survive. And afterwards, it kind of, I guess it brought out that kind of feeling I had from when I was a kid, when I had Stephen Johnson syndrome of like, wow, like life's really short. Like this can all be taken away from me so quickly. Like I should really, do something about this. So rather than shy away from rock climbing, it kind of, it got me more into it, if anything. I'm not really sure how I came up with that idea that was a good idea, but that's where I'm at.
Nice. So let's get into that story a little bit, because I remember when we were on the subway in New York and you were telling that story, we had some random guy that was listening just happened to walk off at one of the stops, and he was like, holy shit, that was the craziest thing I've ever heard, and just kept walking. And we were all just laughing so hard. So how did that all go down? Take us through that whole story. Feel free to like just let it be real long too, because there was like a lot of details in there that I felt like came out that were just insanity.
All right, so Jebel Mist was like I'd done some big wall, but it was all sport, and Jebel Mist was like trad, and it's it's huge and it's remote and it's just in the middle of nowhere, and it's ginormous. So I arranged with a friend that we were going to go, and we'd found this line that we really wanted to do. It had like a big roof in it. It was like possibly the biggest roof on the wall. We were like, that's it. That's the king line right there. We're going to do that. So, we prepared, we organized our gear, we made a plan, it took weeks and weeks of planning. And we went up there and got ready, and we started out really early this morning, probably like 3 a.m. It was dark. We hiked up. It took a long time. I think we probably spent like 7 or 8 hours. So we had to get to base camp first as well, which is also in the middle of nowhere. So we probably spent a day getting to base camp, and then we had to hike from base camp another like 7 hours with our equipment to the wall. And then from the wall, we had to climb up, probably 1,000 feet of wall. We weren't exactly sure because we hadn't climbed the route yet. We just know it's going to be really long. And the week before, we tried to repeat one of the existing routes with a friend, and that was kind of my first time on the wall to really understand and comprehend like what was in order. Because during that attempt, we went up 2 pitches up the wall up what was the classic route that was pretty solid, and my friend pulled off a chunk of rock the size of a coffee table, and he pretty much immediately was done. Like he wanted to go down, and so we decided to bail on the route. And I mean, for me, I wasn't deterred. Not really sure why that was. It probably should have been an alarm bell somewhere. But for me, it was just more of a like, okay, this is real. I should really, give this the respect and be really careful when I'm climbing. But for them, it was too much, and we came down. So this time around, we're heading up, and for the most part, the first few pitches were pretty easy. We knew they were going to be easy. We checked it out, and we were coming to the roof, and being that we were pretty confident in our climbing ability, we were climbing 513. We weren't too worried about the climbing. I think we might have been a little bit lax. We weren't placing so much equipment, and so we'd come to this pitch. We were pretty far up the wall. And I'd made a trad belay, and it was in some cracks. It was good, solid. I think there was like 3 cams and a nut. And my friend Hams and my partner had gone up ahead, and he was almost at a full rope length, so a 70-meter rope. And to this day, neither of us truly know how this big rock fall came to be. But I remember hearing a very like loud, like recognizable rock smash above me, and as I looked up, that was it. I didn't feel anything. There was just black. I was numb all over, and I felt floating. And it's kind of a bit of a blur from that point onwards. Like everything seems to have like slowed down. Like everything became slow motion. Like I feel like I can remember every second that I fell through the air was more like a minute rather than a second. And I didn't know at the time, but what had actually happened is somehow rock had come loose, and a ginormous rock, we were guessing like was the size of, like a sofa or like bigger, had barely touched me, but it hit me hard enough from the back of the helmet that it crushed my face towards the rock, giving me this lovely shiner here. And it also like hit me the rest of the rock as well with enough force that it ripped my belay out the wall, and I'd fallen about 7 meters and hit a ledge on my back, which more rock came down and then crushed me with that. And a rock had actually gone straight through my ankle and out the other side, almost severing my foot off. And to add to this, I nearly pulled my climbing wall partner off the wall. And being that we were pretty confident, we were being pretty cockstrong about our ability. He hadn't placed any equipment really, other than one cam in some rock about midway. So at that point, like, I'd kind of come tight on the ledge, but I'd also was pulling him off the wall, to which he probably would have taken a 35-meter fall to a ledge, which quite likely would have killed him. So right then we're in a predicament. I'd obviously been knocked out. I wasn't sure how long I'd been knocked out for. Everything was kind of blurry. I was lying on my back looking up. Rock was still falling. And I remember coming to with like a rock about to land on my face and rolling over. And when I rolled over, that's when I realized I had the damage to my foot, because there was blood everywhere. I couldn't see, like blood was in my eyes. Like I could feel chunks of bone inside my mouth. Like my tongue, like the inside the roof of my mouth had split completely down the middle. Like I'd cracked my skull here and through, and I could put my tongue like the roof of my mouth was like a flap of skin, and I could put my tongue into the back of my nose, and I knew something immediately was wrong, and I tried to shout Hamza, and that's when I realized like something was wrong. Like all this was broken and not working correctly, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't shout. So laying there on the ledge, I did something which I never thought I'd have to do, and like I got off the rope. Like I didn't want to kill my climbing partner, because that would obviously not do us any good. I needed help, and I wasn't really in a position to help myself. So I cut the ropes from me, which is something you see in those movies that you're like, no one ever cuts the rope. Why do you cut the rope? It's the dumbest thing to do ever. You never need to cut the rope. But I had to, because I could hear him shouting down to me, like, you're pulling me off, you're pulling me off. So I cut the rope, and I kind of dragged myself up against like the wall to try and like avoid more rockfall. And I tried to assess the damage of what was going on. And it was all very surreal. Like I couldn't really, like I kind of knew something really bad had happened. I knew that I'd taken a hit. I wasn't in any pain necessarily, but I could see the damage all around. The fact that I couldn't talk and there's blood everywhere, and I could feel this flap of skin like on my face. I would touch it and be like, oh, like something's not good. So I tried to shout up, and I mean, Hamza came down to me. He rigged a belay and came down. And while he was doing that, I kind of sat there and went through my bag, and I'd only brought 2 bandages with me as a first aid kit. Again, my thinking was that, hey, if I need more than 2 bandages, I'm pretty fucked anyway. So, like, why bring more? And we were attempting to climb this wall in a day. That's the style for this area, is to climb, the entire route in a day nonstop. Like 20-hour push. So I sat there and I kind of like I tied my foot together with one bandage, and I cut off my trousers had like those zips the knee, so I used that to attach my foot back to my my body, because it was kind of flopping around. I had to tie it on, and then with the other one, I tried to tie it around my face, and I wasn't having much luck, to be honest. And Hamza had finally come down. This has taken about an hour just to put my ankle on, and I was kind of just looking at it, like it just didn't seem real, you know. There was so much blood everywhere. Like I was just like, but I wasn't in any pain, so like it just couldn't sink in. And I think I'd suffered that concussion, and like I just nothing was really working. So he came down and he helped me put like my face back together and like make me comfortable the best he could. And I guess that's when it really sunk in. You know, I looked at Hamza in the face, and he just, I could tell something was really, really wrong. And at that point, I was like, okay, you know, like this isn't something like, you know, I've fallen and taken ground falls in England, like growing up there as that style of climbing. You hit the ground now and again, and like it's all about pushing your friends who's got the biggest balls, you know, like you're always trying to do these climbs that, you know, they've got to be at the peak of your difficulty, but with the like maximum risk, you know, where if you fall, like you're going to get seriously hurt. But that's what it was all about when I was growing up. So, you know, I was used to taking these falls, but this time I'd never suffered an injury quite this serious. So, you know, I'm sat there trying to figure out, and I was like, we've just got to get down. Like we knew we couldn't get up, but we'd already come up like a huge way. Like we were several hundred meters up the wall. So at that point, Hamza wasn't, I don't feel like he was super confident. So I set the belay, and I started trying to rescue myself, you know, like I'd gone over this scenario a million times, like in my previous time in my hunger to learn more. I'd taught myself all these self-rescue techniques in classes, like, you know, just in case. I wanted to be that guy, like that survivor mentality. So I knew what to do, and I started going about it pretty, you know, straightforward, trying to forget the fact that I was in this situation. And I started going down the wall, and it was pretty tough. Like having hit the ledge and knocked myself out, pretty embarrassing. I'd kind of pooped my pants. So to go along with all this, like I got trousers full of poo. I'm bleeding everywhere. I'm kind of held together with like really small bandages and like trouser legs that had cut off and stuff. So and just to add to all of this, it's like, you know, 35 degrees Celsius, maybe like 38. Like it's really hot. It's over 100, you know, it's the Middle East. So I started going down the wall, and you know, every time I get to a stance, I'd make an anchor and tie myself in, and Hamza would come down to join me, and I'd just keep going down like that. But this took several hours to do this because we were so far up. And I was also pretty slow at going down because every time my ankle had hit the wall, because it had taken so long, the adrenaline was starting to wear off. If it hit anything, like, and because it wasn't really attached so well, it would bend everywhere, and it would just, there was this like squishing and this like bone knocking, and it was just really intense. Like the pain was just like, I would almost pass out every time I'd feel the pain. It was just excruciating. So several hours later, we got down to the starter ledge of the wall, and we kind of sat there for a minute like, we need help. Like we really need some help on this. This, you know, as much as I want to rescue myself, I don't want to be that guy, you know, that got myself into that situation. I don't want to die here either. And at that point, it became a very real thing that there's a chance I could die here. I'd lost lots of blood, and you know, I couldn't stop the bleeding in my ankle. I was able to stop it from my face, but my ankle, yeah, it was just kind of flowing, and it was like thick and dark, and like it was kind of, I'd look at it and I was just like this isn't real. Like, how is this happening? Like why won't it stop? You know, like I tried everything short of tourniqueting my ankle. I really didn't want to lose my foot. So getting on the ledge, you know, again, back to the techniques I'd learned. We tried like this alpine call. It's like some rope you wrap around and you can carry your friends with it. It's an emergency rescue situation. So first thing I did getting down is I spent some time wrapping a coil and showing Hamza how to do that. And I tried to get on his back, Now, to hike down off these ledges is very steep, very loose, and it's also several hours coming up. So, it's going to be several hours down just to get down to ground where, we're not like stepping on what effectively is loose limestone talus. And I got on Hamza's back. We tried that, and pretty much immediately we realized it was going to be a really bad decision, because if he'd slipped, the ledges were so small all the way down that we both would have died, and it was really hard for him to carry me. And because of how narrow things were, he was knocking my foot on the wall, cause it to like bend backwards and twist around, and the pain was just, again, like it was more than I could bear. And so I was like, after, I probably spent an hour making the coil and trying to figure it out, and we probably walked like 20 feet before we decided this was not going to work. So I'm back on the ground again. This has now been hours and hours and hours. I was like, all right, I'm going to crawl. So that was it. I began what I called the bum shuffle. So you put your hands down and you move your bum, and then you move your foot, and you move your bum, and you move your foot. Now, the deserts in Oman are really dry, and there's cactus everywhere. So, and like in the most disgusting way, I had trousers full of poo. So bum shuffling along the floor was not pleasant in any way. You're just kind of, it's just a really unpleasant experience. I'm hurting. I'm covered in dirt and poo and blood, but it was working. It wasn't elegant, but it was a solution that was working. So that's how we began. I started doing that, and after a few hundred feet, like, I started to wear through the palms of my hands. So I started cutting off clothing to wrap around my hands to do that. And so I began shuffling, and after probably, I think I did that for about 7 hours. During this time, Hamza had attempted to call my boss, who I was working for at the time as a guide and a rope technician, and he was attempting to send a rescue party out to come and get me, as there's no mountain rescue there. And during this like 7 hour, like shuffle, I'd worn through the clothing that I'd torn off and wrapped around my hands, and I'd actually worn all the way through my trousers to my bare bum as well. So like now I'm just like dragging my bare bum, which is bleeding as well, across the floor, trying to get down to a safe place where I was hoping someone would find us. The reason we stopped after this time period that I mentioned is that we found a relatively flat spot that we hoped someone could come and get a helicopter, or they could pick me up. And also because I lost so much blood that I was no longer being able to be coherent and conscious. I was in and out of consciousness. And as much as like I'd been telling myself, like, this is mind over matter, you just got to keep going, I don't think I was making much sense to Hamza, who would ask me questions. And the pain at this point, because I didn't have painkillers, just everything hurt. Like, my face was smashed to pieces, like my teeth were all knocked in, and like my jaw was all cracked, and like my face and my ankle, like just the combination of everything. I was in a very poor situation. And I kind of I told Hamza, I was like, I don't think I can go any further. Like, this is it. Like, either I'm going to die here or I need some help. And at that point, we'd realized, the situation, and we'd found this flat pit. So we constructed a very rudimental shelter using, what we had with us to keep me out of the sun. And I kind of just tried to drink as much water as I could to keep me hydrated, because alongside, bleeding a lot, like, you've got a very real chance of dying of dehydration out there. It's incredibly hot, and the sun gets to you very quickly. And then another factor was the sun was going down, and the chances of people finding us in the middle of a desert were becoming increasingly slim. And so my boss's rescue party, they'd obviously heard about this, we'd called them from the wall as soon as the accident happened, and so they'd had, you know, the best part of a day to come and find us. So they turned up late in the evening, saw me, and realized that there was no way to evacuate. At which point he started contacting kind of political advisors in the country, and we were lucky. We got the Sultan's military helicopter. How on earth they wangled this, I have no idea. But Sultan's military helicopter came out to search for us, and we saw this helicopter. You know, this is obviously, you know, we're talking, you know, over 12 hours later, you know, since the accident. We saw it flying past, and we tried to make like signs, we tried to wave things, but in a desert and a wall, it's very hard for them to see anything. And it flew past us 3 times, and we later found out they were about to leave when they finally saw us, which if they had, would have certainly been the death of me. Like there's no doubt about it. And upon like them find us, they came over and they lowered down just towards a waist belt. Now, not being that they're not very experienced in rescue, because that wasn't their primary job, the guy came down and he put this like saddle under my arms and attempted to kind of winch me up. But I guess somewhere along the way there must have been some miscommunication, because instead of lifting us up, the helicopter actually dragged us for probably 50 feet along the floor. So my ankle, I thought actually my foot was going to get pulled off because it wasn't held on so well, and that was pretty painful too. I think at that point I passed out from the pain, and I remember like, I know I didn't pass out for long. It couldn't have been more than like a minute or so, and I guess like I remember him like shouting at me like, hey, like trying to get me to come round, and we were kind of like flying through the air at this point above the desert. Like I could feel the wind. I wasn't really sure what was going on. It was pretty painful. I wasn't actually connected to this like sponge belt under my arms, and like he kind of winched us up. They got me on the floor of the helicopter, and I kind of just lay there on the floor the whole time. Like I couldn't move. There was a sense of relief, but there was also a sense that this isn't over yet. And you know, they didn't apply any medical treatment. So I was just bleeding on the floor of the helicopter, this big military Russian helicopter. And they flew us out to a hospital where, like, at this point, like, everything was really hazy because I think I'd lost so much blood that I was pretty much borderline death. Like, I was about to die, you know. I was you know, kind of flirting with death at this point. And all I remember was that I got out and they left me on the floor outside the helicopter at the hospital and took off again. And that was it. No help, no staff, no nothing. I was left on the floor at the hospital. And I think like when they dropped me off, like I can't remember if I was like conscious or unconscious, but I almost feel I'm not sure whether they thought I was just dead, and they just left me there and hoped that the staff would come get me. You know, like a helicopter land at the hospital obviously isn't an everyday thing. So, but I lay there for probably 15 minutes, and I could see people looking at me, but no one was helping me. So I started crawling along the floor towards the door of the hospital, and again, just no one helped. And I later came to realize that they have this thing called Samaritan's Law in the Middle East, where if they help you, there's a chance they have to pay your medical bills. I think that might have been the reasoning behind it. Not that like these people are in any way like bad people, because they're not, you know, but that medical care is very expensive, and you know they could barely look after themselves. Like, you know, they're farmers and goat herders, and they live in the deserts. They can't afford this. You know, this white person's just falling out the sky effectively. Like, they can't afford to help. So I crawled to the front of the hospital, and I remember seeing doctors come towards me through the doors, and I don't remember anything else. And the next thing I know, I think I was unconscious for several days, and I came round to find I was stitched together pretty good. I still to this day don't know fully everything that happened. I don't have any of the medical records, but apparently I was in pretty bad shape, and I'd lost a lot of blood. I'd had to have several blood transfusions because I'd obviously, bleeding for 15 hours from all these wounds. Like, there's only so much blood, before you got none left. So, and then, I came to, like I said, I don't know how long I was in there. It was a pretty messed up state. And there was this happy-go-lucky, crazy kid from Somerset, England, laughing at the end of our bed, who happened to be one of my friends that was out there teaching me stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, bloody lucky you're alive." He's like, "How the hell did you survive that?" And I think everyone was just kind of amazed I was alive. There's actually been a death in the company through an accident only like the year before, and like, I think they thought I was about to be the next statistic. So I came to, and it was all a little weird and surreal. Like, my foot was in a cast. I couldn't actually see what was going on. I didn't know what had happened to it. My face, I just had bandages absolutely everywhere. Like, I looked like a mummy because, like, I just happened to, like, with the combination of, like, crawling and falling and the hits, like, I had bandages on my backside, on my hands, like, on my face, on my legs, like, just, I had cuts everywhere. I was just a mess. Yeah, I sat in the hospital for a little while, and I remember, like, sat there and I was just like, I didn't really know what had happened, like, the impact and the hit was really hard to figure out, like, where the accident started and ended, and how long I'd been in the hospital. I had all these questions, and it actually took months to figure out the full picture of what had happened afterwards, because I wasn't really sure, and I think in the heat and the kind of chaos of it all, everyone had suffered, especially Hamza, my friend, who I think mentally was pretty damaged by it, like, for life, and even now he's really upset when he thinks about it. Like, he has a lot of guilt and weight on his mind for it, though I don't personally blame him. It really messed him up. So yeah, that was kind of that was kind of how I got into big wall climbing.
That's the craziest shit I've ever heard. So how did you, coming out of that, obviously there was a recovery period. Where was your mindset at while you were recovering, and how did you kind of, like, because it seems like you dealt with that pretty well, or at least, like, this was such a meaningful part of your life that you weren't just going to let something like that stop you from climbing again. Like, what happened after that, as far as the recovery process and, like, your ability to kind of deal with that mentally, to step back onto a wall after that, and not only that, but plan what you're planning now to go back to that same spot?
So directly after that, I had, like, eventually, the Middle East, the Arab Spring, and the whole Middle East just wasn't particularly safe at that time. There was protests in the streets, and things were going pretty bad all around. So the decision was made that it'd be best if I left, because I wasn't in a position to be helpful to myself should the country, fall under this this Arab Spring. There was a lot of protests and deaths and things. So I was barely stable. I got on a plane. They flew me back to England, where I was on crutches at the time, so I could kind of move around. And I went back to Leicester, in England, and I stayed with friends to recover. And I had a lot of time to think about what had happened, and kind of, I guess, assess the choices I'd made in life, and what had brought me to where I was at the time. this in my head was now like practically the third time I'd been dead in my life. Like I was born pretty much dead with jaundice. And then I had this Steven Johnson syndrome, which was, normally a fatal killer. Like no one knows the cause of it, and there's no cure. So like, I was like, wow, that's two. And then to add to this is like my third strike. Like, how am I still here? Like these are three huge signs that, like I should be doing something with my life. Like, like anyone else would have been like, yo, I should probably find something different to do with my life, like, but if anything, I was like, well, you know what? I like this. I'm good at it. I feel a real sense of kind of like it allowed me to kind of search some purpose in life through doing it, and I really liked exploring, like climbing. From the start, had kind of taken me to places that I would never have chosen to go, but this had become this compass, this life compass to give me direction. Instead of being like, as long as I'm not in prison, I'm okay. Now it was like, yo, if I'm not climbing, what's the point doing anything, So back in the UK, I kind of sat there and I went through, obviously the depression period that everyone would go through when you're in injury for a long time. And most people suffer like post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic depression. And like before, like with my Steven Johnson syndrome, rather than going to depression, I'd actually found it a motivation. And apparently it doesn't happen with everyone, but people can suffer from, I can't remember the name of it now, but I guess it's like it's the opposite effect. I found the positivity in it, and instead it was like this fire inside me, like I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna be better and I'm gonna do everything like to the best of my ability. And if I'm not, there's no point doing it, like if I don't take a chance, I don't stand a chance. Like, so I really kind of was, forcing myself to recover. The doctor was like, you might not walk again. If you do, you might walk with a hobble. You've got about 9 months of recovery. And I was like, this isn't happening. Like, I'm not letting it take this long. I'm going to walk again. And 2 months later, I actually ran into the doctor's office. And he's like, how you doing? I was like, I'm doing good. Like, I'm walking funny, but like, I can't do squats, but I'm okay. And he's like, what do you mean you're walking funny? I was like, well, I had the cast taken off at the hospital and I've been running. And he's like, there's no way you've been running. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I wake up in the morning and I've been stretching my ankle, because like when they'd set my ankle and pull the pieces back together, they'd set it down a little bit, which meant I couldn't actually walk. I had to go on my toes, and the pain from the tendons shortening was it's pretty painful, actually, stretching out tendons again. So what I would do is I'd just stretch my tendon to the point where I could barely manage the pain anymore. And then I'd wait and I'd do that. I'd spend my entire day just deliberately pushing the pain and stretching my ankle to the point I thought I was going to, like, could I deal with it, And then that went on for a month of just trying to stand up and stretch. And I did that like 12 hours a day. The only goal for my day every day was to be able to walk. And then, like 2 months later, running to the doctor, he was like, this is unbelievable. Like, he couldn't believe it. Like, I was missing some bones out my foot. So like the fact that I could even walk seemed to be like a bit of a miracle. And the fact that I'd ran there in 2 months when he thought, he'd given me a 9-month window. Yeah, it was a real eye opener. And I was like, wow, like if I can do this, like I can do anything. Like, doctors give you that thing where they tell you the recovery time, but they base it on, the average person. I was like, I'm not going to be average. Like, I don't want to be average. Like, I want to be exceptional. Like, everything I do, I want to be exceptional. And so like that was it. I got back into climbing, like, 2 months later, rather than, all this time on the road. And like I kind of quickly adapted through climbing, and I kind of got so immersed in it, and I just wanted to bring like what I had to the climbing community and develop it. And And kind of brings me to where I am now. It's been 2010 was the accident. It's now going to be 2017, 7 years on. I'm obviously much more experienced. I'm much stronger, much more capable, and I've spent a long time planning to go back to this, and I'm hoping for a little bit of vindication in my life. Like rather than being beaten and rolling over, I wanna go back and like face this this fear. Like to say I'm fearless seems almost arrogant, but it's not that I'm not fearless. I have a respect for it, but um, I don't really sense it so much. Like I'm not afraid of falling or getting hurt and hitting the ground because I know that like, hey, you recover. And but with this, it's more of it might not be just an injury. Like yeah, I came so close to dying before that. You know, I definitely don't want that to unfold again. Like it's a very glaring reality of the possibility. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get back there, and my good friend Kevin Jorgensen's coming to help me, who's obviously pretty well known for establishing the world's hardest rock climb. So yeah, that's the goal this February. We're gonna go back and we're gonna tackle it head on and finish the route that almost took my life.
That's intense. So what kinds of things have you been going through both mentally and physically, or just like planning in general to try and tackle this again? Because obviously there's going to be some sort of mental game involved, being that you're going to be in the same spot. And I think you had mentioned that there's a possibility that that blood could still be there since it doesn't really rain or anything in that area.
Yeah, so apparently my friends left all my equipment up there, so all my ropes and everything is still up there, which will be interesting to see how they did with 7 years in the Omani desert.
Wow.
And yeah, the blood stains are probably for sure staying in different places. So that's certainly going to be interesting to go back and see and kind of retrace what happened because it's all a little bit of a blur. For me, what I've been doing is I went to Yosemite recently, and I just really got acquainted with climbing on trad and being run out, and being in Yosemite. I really focused on trying to do some big solos, like 500 feet plus, and just kind of getting confident with being run out, like and kind of strengthening my mental aspect of my confidence of knowing what I'm capable of, because I find a lot of accidents happen that I've read about is when you lack confidence in your own ability. Like if you question your own ability, then you take longer to perform moves, which gets you pumped, which means you might fall in a place you don't want to fall, which is normally the case. Like you're like, oh, like I don't want to fall here, which causes you to question your ability, which causes you to get pumped, which can cause the fall. So instead, I went about it by trying to be as mentally strong as I could. So yeah, soloing has been my way of doing that. Just making sure that if I'm going to do this move, I'm going to do it, and that's it. There's no questioning. Like I can do this. I'm capable. And when I'm soloing, I don't feel like I'm in any danger in any way. I feel confident, and I'm hoping that is a direct translation of when we get to the wall.
Nice. So you would say that I think it's hard to explain to people that kind of like mind state that you get in when you're climbing, and I think you even experience it when you're doing easier stuff when you're first getting into it. But I'm sure even more so with what you're doing now, is like you're not really pushing away the fear or the possibility of like all this other stuff happening. You're just being methodical enough to the point where you're planning what you're doing, and you have enough confidence in your own ability that your entire focus is on what you're doing right now, so that sort of thing doesn't happen. And the more your head kind of goes to the possibilities of what could get fucked up is when stuff actually goes wrong.
Definitely. So for me, I came up with this term. I call it Terminator vision, and it's it's like, remember the movie Terminator, the original, and it would show you through his eyes, and it would like show you that red, but like it would have targets that he'd focus on. That's kind of how my mind starts to focus when I start climbing. But where instead of targets being the people he was going to destroy, it's kind of like the climbing holds, you know. And in my head, like it's strange. Like I analyze, like, oh, it's that direction. It looks like this. It's probably going to climb like this, you know, like, and I get tunnel vision, and I guess that's part of also what attracts me to climbing. You know, like everyone's got these worries in life, you know, and they're real worries. Everyone's got things they need to deal with. But when you're climbing, if you're anything but 100% focused, you're letting in the opportunity to fail, because, you know, like it just demands everything. And so, yeah, with this, like this mental strengthening and this kind of, I guess, it's it's kind of like you have to place yourself in this particular space where success is the only option, and that's where I'm going to be when I get there. And the training for that, like I said, is that soloing and just being really sure of yourself, because there's no other option.
Do you find that you take that sort of kind of like mental angle toward things that you do in your own life too, outside of climbing? Or like did a lot of those experiences that you have flirting with death affect climbing, and then did climbing affect your life the other way? Because you're doing a lot of other stuff outside of just climbing in general, that it seems like you're just going at full force, which I think is really awesome. Because I think there's this portrayal of athletes or people that have more of a social following online, that it's just like they're a one-trick pony. It's like this one thing that they're really good at, and that's it. And I think it's really cool when people, you know, prove that they're going at other things that they enjoy doing in life and taking that same fire with them to other stuff.
For sure. So I think what climbing really ingrains in you is the ability to fail and fail again, but fail forward. So like not seeing failure as the end point, but as an understanding of where your bar is. And the idea is you always want to make that bar higher, you know. It's like this tenacious drive to like be the best you can be. And in my mind, like I don't ever judge myself against other people. I judge myself against my former self. So I'm like, where's my bar? I want to push that further, you know. I want it to be higher. And climbing's really conducive to that, you know, like failing, and eventually you get it. And that's it. Something clicks and you're like, cool, next challenge. And that flows over into the rest of my life, you know, and you start to realize, like, you know, I've had multiple businesses and projects that I've started, and it's a little bit due to the blessing of my ADHD that doesn't really give me any peace. And so I'm always looking for, like, where can I push my bar, my boundaries, you know, like, you know, climbing was just the start of it, you know. It kind of opened me up to like, hey, like you can push your bar as far as you set your goal, you know. Like when I, you know, like I said, when I started out, people are like, oh, you should do this and this and this, and this is how you get from A to B. And I was like, no, I can go from A to C, you know, and skip all that stuff. Like just because someone else has done it that way, that doesn't mean that's my way or someone else's way, you know. So you start to realize all these doorways and these opportunities. And so yeah, I'm really heavily involved in projects, everything from writing guidebooks, and on my second now that I finished, I'm just on the process of uploading it to a digital platform to a place called Parque La Huasteca in Mexico.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. I've been up all night just doing that. I just started a company making my own climbing hardware, which has taken me about 12 months to work on. Lots of testing, lots of failure. Something you know, whoever thinks they're going to start making their own climbing equipment, I never thought I would. I didn't even know how to start going about it, you know. And it's just like trial and error and failing. And I've definitely, for every one success I've had that like I consider a personal success, I must have failed thousands of times, you know. And so like but this is exactly what climbing has given me. It's given me this mindset where like, hey, like just because you failed, that doesn't mean it's the end of it. Like, don't worry, don't fret. Like, if you fail, don't fail to learn the lesson, and just keep going.
So I have a couple questions from just that little bit that you were saying there. Do you have any tools that you kind of use mentally to get out of those ruts when you inevitably do end up hitting failure? Because I think it's this weirdly familiar zone when you end up going for a lot of these things that you want to accomplish in life. Is you know that at some point you're going to end up in that space. But I think every time it happens, it almost hits harder than the time before because you know what you're capable of doing, and when you get there, you're more pissed off at yourself and like ready to attack something else. So what kind of things do you do when you end up in that place to kind of get yourself back on the steps toward where you want to be?
That's a really good question. And it's actually a really difficult one to answer because there's no one thing that actually does it for me. And to touch on that, I'm actually going through something now. I've just taken just over a month and a half off for a shoulder injury. And just before I got injured, I was probably in one of the best shapes of my life. I was climbing strong V11, V12, like projecting V13. And as of 3 days ago, I started getting back into training again, and I went to the gym, and my strength is there. I can do like one finger, one arm pull up, but I can't climb V4. And for me, it's devastating to my confidence. Like, it's even talking about it right now, it's really hard to take on because I feel like I'm back where I was right before that, right after that accident. The only benefit now is like I know how to get through it because once you've gone through the motions before, and you understand like that failure, there is ways back to it. But like you said, each failure, it's definitely like harder, and the impacts, you sense them a lot more. And I think also as I got older, like this constantly like failure, defeat, and trying to stand again, it's very wearing. So this time around, for this particular instance, and I guess for those other failures, is every time I look at these failures and I assess them, I find that the best way is like I don't allow myself to have any self-pity. I'm pretty harsh judge of myself, and I have a lot of, I guess, philosophies in my head that I just, it's almost like a mantra, and they're very cliche in some ways. Like I tell myself to fear nothing but complacency, in that like once I become complacent, then I'm no longer progressing forward, and that's pretty scary to me because in my mind I'm like, my Steven Johnson syndrome, when it comes back, because I've been told that it will come back, basically it's probably going to kill me. So we don't know when that'll come back because there's no cure and there's no idea of what causes it. And that could be any day I could just die from that, which is a pretty scary thing to kind of have going through your head now and again. And then alongside that, just not blaming anyone else and really taking that upon yourself to be like, hey, you've got no one else to blame but yourself. Like, and people might say that's unreasonably tough on yourself, but at the same time, like if you're not tough on yourself, like you can't expect anyone else to be. Like, being your own worst enemy is in some ways a blessing in disguise, and learning to redirect that frustration into positivity rather than depression is something that took me a long time to do, but I'm in that position now where I'm able to do that. And for me, the best way to overcome these these negativities and these hits that you take in life, whether it's climbing or business or whatever it is, these unexpected things, is I always think life could be worse. Like, I could be where I was in a hospital bed, and making a plan, like rather than sit and complain and be depressed, I make a plan, and that's it. Like, the plan is what gets me through. It's like, hey, like, look, this has happened, accept it, get over it, what are you gonna do? And that right there is how I get from one point to another. and just keep checking myself, you know, like you start moving, and every time you think you're getting complacent, like look back, track what you've done, you know, like, okay, last week, you know, I finished this part of this project, you know, like what's next? Or, you know, I tried to do this with my project and it failed, like, and it's like a loop. It's like you fail, you assess, and you either decide to keep pushing on or you pivot. So you either decide like, okay, next time I just need to try harder. You know, this time I just, you know, wasn't aware of this, but next time I can succeed because of this. And so, yeah, there's the whole like fail, learn, move, and that's it.
I think that's cool too, because I think there's a lot of people that have very analytical minds or just think a lot, and they end up always coming to that sort of approach regardless of what they're doing. So for you, it's climbing and business and a lot of this other stuff that you're involved with, but I think that applies to so many other things, and it's really cool because it's kind of like a signage system for life, and like how you can kind of navigate your own life, but it applies to so many different things, which is really cool. And I think the other thing that you touched on that's awesome is gratitude. And you know, when you get to those points where you feel like shit, looking back on like all the things that you've accomplished and all the things that you've been able to, you know, experience in life is pretty nuts. And it can, like, at least for me, put me back in a place of being very happy pretty quickly, just because it's like I know that there's not a lot of people that have you know, regardless of all the things that I think are going wrong in life or whatever, you know, there's a lot of people that will never be able to experience a lot of that stuff. So the other question I had was, so when you get back to this point of, all right, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm really excited again, you know, there's like this fiery energy again. You mentioned like getting to this point where you're seeing all these doors start to open. How do you end up figuring out which door you want to go through or what you want to pursue? Because I think there's always that point when you're kind of like building yourself up again of, okay, I'm at it, you know, like I'm at my peak again. It's time to mess some shit up and do some really cool stuff. And then it's like, all right, now where do I focus it? Like, how do you end up deciding what has piqued your interest and what you're going to follow?
Yeah. So, there's that saying, don't chase every breaking wave, you know, like there's going to be another one. And, I kind of adopt that philosophy a little bit. And, but at the same time, having I'm going to call this ADHD a blessing. I often have like numerous projects on, like, I would say any one time I have at least 10 projects moving in one direction. And some people would argue that, you know, that's unfocused, and that, you know, how can you succeed when you've got, you know, your attention spread so thin? But having ADHD, the reason I call it a blessing is because my ability to handle multiple projects at once is like I've trained it. Trained it, I guess is the right word, over the years, to be able to, like, okay, like right now I'm going to focus on this. And with anything, there's like a lot of things come down to communication, and communication means time, you know, and there's waiting periods. So I like to fill in every second of my day with something moving in the right direction. So I'll work on one project, say it stops because I need an answer from someone else. Well, that project's got a very definite end there. Like, if I can't move forward, so okay, that was the priority today. Next project, like, and then I will fill my day and my free time exactly like that. You know, like I'll train to the point where, you know, I can't do anything. I'm hurting too bad. Okay, that's the end of that project. Like my personal project of self-improvement. You know, what's next? Okay, guidebook, go to the coffee shop. Okay, I'll do that until, you know, well, I need to talk to this person. So I arrange that meeting, and then, okay, next project. Okay, climbing equipment, like, I need this. Okay, send that email, that phone call to China, or, you know, wherever. And then that's very finite stuff. And that's how I go about my life. I focus for short periods, and having ADHD, that's actually the only way I can manage it as well, because my attention is so terrible. Like, I have to have these small bursts of projects, you know, and then I just kind of go through them and help them move forward each time a little bit more.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I thought it was cool to have you on the show, is because I felt like there was a lot of things that we approached similarly in life, and that is one of those things too, where it's like following a path to the end and knowing that it's the end, so that you can move on to something else. Like whether that's a short-term end and then it can pick back up, or a long-term end, like just I think it's the analytical way of living with no regrets, because you're able to look back at something and be like, I beat that thing to death like 3 times, and I know that it wasn't going to work. And so like, I can go focus on this thing now, because you don't have that in the back of your mind constantly being like, you should have done this. You should have tried a little bit harder. It's like, if you follow it to the end, that's it. It's done. And then you can, put your energy into other stuff.
I completely agree in every way. Like I definitely don't start anything I don't think I can finish. But I mean, that's kind of broad. I feel like I can finish everything, but what I mean is, it's like, if I'm going to start something, like I'm really committed. Like when I start something, I have 100% commitment. If I'm going to do it, I am going like balls to the wall. Like there is nothing going to get in my way. And that goes for everything from, like, whether it's going for a run or whether it's making a soup, like everything is going to be like the best I can possibly be. And I'm going to go as hard as I can at everything, even if it's knocking 2 seconds off my run, I'm making that soup like extra dank. Like everything is going to be like better than before, because if I'm not improving, in my mind, I'm failing. And so that's kind of my life cycle of like, just keep going, keep improving. We're all capable of it. Everyone can always do a little bit better than they did last time. We're all capable. Whether, like someone likes to make patchwork quilts, and you're like, well, how interesting can that be? Be like, well, I don't know, try different materials, like whatever, like look for your own, like your own personal like step forward. Like what is that next step? Like you look at people like Elon Musk, that he's infamous for like, if he was like, oh well, cars run on gasoline, and he was like, screw that, I'm gonna make them out, they're gonna run on electricity. And then like, he's got this Mars mission. Like he could, have the same boundaries as everyone else and allow himself to see those boundaries that someone else has set, but he doesn't. He sets his own, and I think that's really incredible. And for me, that inspires the shit out of me when I'm like, yo, if they can push themselves past everyone else's expectations, so can I, and so can anyone else if they really want to. It's all in their head.
And I was just reading this book called Creativity Inc., and it's by one of the guys that helped start Pixar. And what he talks about is this phase inevitably when you're in any sort of like creative anything, whether that be business or training, whatever that is, where you come into it. He talks about it like a tunnel, where you come into it and you can kind of see the light for a little bit, and then you at some point you always end up in the middle, where you can't see where you started and you can't see where you're going. How do you deal with that sort of thing when you're coming into a project full force and you're like, yeah, I'm going to kill this. This is going to be great. This is where all my energy is going to. I think the thing that ends up kind of like throwing the wrench in the plan of what a lot of people do in regards to their own projects like that is time, because they don't recognize how long it's going to take to get to where they want to be. And so they get partway through this, like in the middle of the tunnel, where they can't see the start and they can't see the end. And that's where things break down. How do you end up getting through that period where you're kind of like in the middle of what's going on and you're not really sure, like what's happening or what the next step might be? Like, how do you deal with that weird gray area in different projects?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think in all projects, you actually come to that point as well, where you just like, what am I doing? Like, and it is that moment where you're questioning, like, you question yourself, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Like, am I even going in the right direction? Is this really what I want? And I think it comes down to a combination of things of, like you said, when you start something, make sure you finish it. Just, look for closure, like know where those points are. And for me, like making checkpoints along the way so that you kind of avoid that situation the best you can, like you will come to it, I feel like, inevitably. But when you get to that, like if you've got a checkpoint, like, hey, I know I'm going to get to this, and at this point, when I can't remember why I started it necessarily, or it's not so clear anymore, because like as you progress through anything, you're always learning and you're absorbing information, and sometimes that information will change your opinion of your initial motivations, for sure. And I think you're in the middle of the tunnel, you're not sure where to go. For me, I returned to something that is familiar. So say it was let's say I'm starting a new business, for example, and I'm just like, okay, what's the next step? I'll go look at my old businesses that have failed. And not just in climbing have I failed, I've failed in so many ways, like in everything, whether it's like businesses or like physical fitness or like writing. Like I've sucked at a lot of things for a long time before I finally got any good at them. And for me, that check is just going back and being like, looking at things I've done and being like, that was this time, I'm now here. Like, look at that project and how it failed and use that as the motivation to keep moving forward, because I'm not sure where it is anymore, but I know like this is a phase, like it's a mental state, and if I keep pushing, like you'll eventually you'll find yourself again, you'll find that light, and you're like, okay, refocused, and you can go at it again.
So how did you deal with that sort of thing? Like what motivated you to do some of the guidebook stuff that you've done, both with the New York one and then the one down in Mexico? Like walk us through a little bit of that decision making. And was that did the New York book or the New York guidebook come after the Oman stuff?
Yeah, so after Oman and the recovery, I moved to New York, and that kind of project came around because I was trying to find a job at the time, and I had some spare time, and I had no money, I was broke, but I wanted to climb, obviously. So I went down and I started looking for boulders in the parks, and I decided that what, like, there's no guide to this, and it'd be really cool because I've noticed that in climbing, like we don't get very well, in general, we don't get very much free time. People are like, wow, I get 30 days off a year. I'm like, that's it? Like, you consider that a success, that you get 30 days of your life to yourself every year? Like, calculate that over a lifetime. You get a year to yourself when you're not working. Like, that doesn't seem like a life I want to live, really. Like you really put things in perspective. So I was like, people don't want to go climbing with their free time. They're celebrating their free time, with whatever expression they choose, whether that's, walking, sitting on the sofa, climbing. And I was like, well, if I can help people, like take that time that they have and really apply it the best they can, then that'd be pretty cool. And then when I heard that, for like 20 or 30 years, people have been talking about doing a guidebook, but no one had done it, I was like, well, cool, I got some free time.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, challenge accepted. And I guess it's just a little bit of my personality. I'm always trying to find that next challenge, like that I can push myself. And I was really interested and curious in writing. Like honestly, my English was pretty terrible. Like, in fact, I always tell people, like, my Mexican girlfriend actually has better English than I do. And that's actually true. She's incredibly smart. But like I wanted to kind of find a new outlet. I wanted to progress somewhere, and like I was like, what, writing is going to be it. This is a great opportunity medium, and like, what's the worst that could happen? I produced something bad, I failed, I'll learn, I'll try again. So I went about doing it, and eventually, like a couple of years later, that guidebook came out, and it came out really well, and it was like really well received, and I was like, wow, like this is awesome. Like maybe I can do this. Maybe I'm not so bad, and like, and I compared it to other people's, and I was like, I started to recognize my strengths and my weaknesses, and I'm an obsessive planner, and I have this attention to detail that's like, that's pretty good, and so I was like, wicked, like I can write and I can do this, so I'm good with details. So like, I'll do guidebooks. And that kind of, was the motivation for the one I got down to Mexico. And, same thing happened. People had talked about having a guidebook for years, and the quality of what they had was, they'd attempted it, but they just didn't really have, their bar wasn't quite as high, like they hadn't been as blessed as I had to go through these challenges, and they hadn't, I guess they hadn't failed as much as I had to like know that like, hey, like, you can do better, and like better yourself. So right now, like I said, like I'm closing up that second guidebook, and the motivations that they come from are simply just, I want to push myself like that bit further. What's the next step?
What is the parallel between like the guidebook that you tackled with New York and then the one down in Mexico? What sorts of things did you take from the New York one that were similar to Mexico, but then what was different? Because I'm assuming that style or the work that you're doing there has to be a lot different than if you're going up onto a multi-pitch by yourself, where you're just trying to push yourself and you're climbing. This has to be just a different approach, right?
Yeah. So with the New York City bouldering guide, it was for bouldering. So a lot of that is it's pretty straightforward. You can go out with a pad and some shoes and go climb and stuff. The one to Huasteca is a little more inclusive, and I decided another reason, motivation for doing it is I'd never done a guidebook to sport climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I wish I hadn't started, because I have this thing where, if I start a project, I got to finish it. And this is my third year working on it now. And with all my projects, like I set my bar somewhere, and then I get a bit further along, and I want to raise the bar, until like I'm happy. So it started out, as a rock climbing guide, and now it's a complete guide to the national park, where I've gone and hiked all these canyons. So it's hiking, mountain biking, base jumping, highlining, plants and fauna, and secret spots. So it's and a history book. So it's the complete guide to this canyon that basically is like the Yosemite of northern Mexico. It started out as just a climbing guide. I was gonna do like a few walls, and if I just released it with like just climbing, like half the routes, because there's thousands, that would have been, in most people's eyes, a great achievement, and the locals would have been psyched. Like, they're really psyched that it's coming out with so much information. But, for me, like I said, I always want to push that bar. I always want to try and improve myself, because there's always that opportunity for improvement. It's recognizing it and just being like, fuck yeah, I'm going to challenge myself to be a better me and, like, do better work. And again, like, it's almost like a life mantra, like I'm just kind of like punishing myself with this like fail forward mantra, like, hey, like check yourself before you wreck yourself, like like don't let yourself get complacent, because as soon as you do, you're gonna just be like, you're gonna get in the grind, and it's, I feel blessed, like I consider this my job to deliver this like product that's gonna like help other people, like like take their time and have a good time. And like for me, that's the reward, because you don't really make money from guidebooks. If anything, it costs you a lot of money. You lose a lot. But when I like get out there and like I see my friends, like we go to New York, I see people using the guidebook and having a good time, or like finish this one, I got to Huasteca and I see all these people climbing, like that's it. That's as good as it gets. Forget the money. Like that's the best reward, when you see people like having a great time, and that you're contributing towards something positive, and like your work has a purpose, and you can see it like unfolding. That's it. It's rewarding, Whereas like, if I go to work and like to fill in some of my downtime, and I'm an arborist and I just cut down trees, I'm like, well, it's not really a lot of reward to that, Like it's like working for a paycheck, and most of the time it's I'm doing it to someone's got a branch they don't like the look of, so I remove it, and I'm like, I feel kind of purposeless in life, I'm not really contributing towards the greater good of the world. And so with something like a guidebook, it might be affecting this small little community, but at least I'm contributing in a positive way that's it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, that was awesome to hear too, and it was a great way to kind of like wrap up the whole conversation. So to end things, if there was one or two little bits of advice that you'd give someone that's trying to go after their own thing in life, and they might be having difficulties, or like, they're just younger and they haven't, failed forward as much as somebody like you, what would you tell somebody like that to either give them that extra nudge or give them like some bit of wisdom to help them along the way? What would it be?
I would say that there's a huge amount of self-belief that's needed. And that doesn't happen overnight. You have to like trust yourself. And so to put it in a nutshell, I feel like believing in yourself and not seeing failure as an end point, but as a checkpoint. It's like, it's part of your success. Like when you fail enough and you look back, you can be like, wow, like look at all this that I've overcome, and look at all the, like, along the way you're going to get people that tell you you can't do this, you're not going to work, and you have to remember that they're judging you by their standards. So yeah, my only advice really is set your own goals, believe in yourself, and when you fail, don't fail to learn the lesson.
Nice. That was pretty simple and very straightforward. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. This was probably one of the cooler episodes I think we've done. So I'm pumped to get you back on after you take down that Oman route and, hear about how it all went.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Sick. Cool. Well, have a great rest of your day, man. And we'll plan one of these in the future and kick some ass in the meantime.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. It's great to talk to you. And dude, it's good to see you, man. And hopefully I'll speak to you very shortly.
Yeah, heck yeah. And if you ever end up in the Salt Lake area, you always have enough friends here to, make some cool shit happen.
Hell yeah. You got it, man.
Take it easy.
Later, bro.
Peace.